I'm sitting there, and there's blood running down my arms, and there's a knock on my door. And I was ashamed of what I just tried to do. I thought it was probably going to be one of my friends at the door. And so I put on a flannel, put on a pair of sunglasses because I was crying. And I opened that door, Nathan, and there was a pastor standing there.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Take on the Lake with LakeExpo. I'm Nathan Bechtel. Thanks so much for joining us. And let me just start with my apologies for the long gap since the last episode. I've had a lot of folks that have listened and have been really encouraging and have loved the show. And so to those folks only, not to anybody who hates the show, only to you guys, my fans of the show, I apologize for the long gap. I didn't really have any good excuses for it, so thanks for bearing with me. But we've got a great episode today and some more great ones coming down the pike. Keep on keeping on and being patient with us. Appreciate that. Today in the studio, actually, I have Chris Sanders. And Chris is somebody that exhibits basically something that I think that I want my audience to know more about, which is there are really great things happening in the lake community that are totally behind the scenes, and that you would never know about unless you met a person who was doing them. And this is what's so amazing about the lake is it feels so small and simultaneously so large. And so I got into a conversation with Chris recently and was like, man, you have to come on the show and we have to talk about this. So in the studio today, Chris Sanders with Lighthouse Mission, Freedom Through Christ Ministries. I had to reference my notes because I didn't want to mess up the title for that. But Lighthouse Mission, Chris, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah. You and I met each other a few years ago. Our sons actually were playing on club baseball together a little bit. I think they both were pitching, actually.
Yeah.
And I don't remember. I think we just were sitting in the stands watching the boys and ended up chatting a little bit and had some mutual friends that we know and that kind of thing. And then hadn't seen you in a little bit. And then now our sons play on the same team with Osage High School.
Yep.
Baseball. And so the other day at a game, we started chatting a little bit. I had remembered vaguely what you did, and so we just got into the whole what do you do and what's it like conversation. And I found it really not only interesting, but really important, the work that you're doing and worth people knowing about. The spoiler on that is that there's not really a huge thing that you or anybody is asking people to do in relation to this. I just think it's really great that people know about what you guys are doing at Lighthouse Mission. So tell me a little about Lighthouse Mission, Freedom Through Christ Ministries. What do you guys do in summation?
Lighthouse Mission, Freedom Through Christ Ministries is a faith-based transitional house for guys who are getting out of jail, prison, rehab facilities. We basically just help guys transition from inside the institution or incarceration back into society. In a nutshell, that's what we do. Yeah, we help guys transition from institution
so
or
guys
incarceration.
Step out of prison.
Yes.
And you were telling me they have to have a plan, right, for their housing when they get out of prison.
In Missouri, if you're incarcerated in Department of Corrections, you have to have what's called a home plan before they will release you into society. And for some of the guys that are in there, that is an obstacle because they've either burned bridges with family or they don't want to go right back to their same playmates and playgrounds. And so that's where we come into play is we help guys with a home plan.
Okay. So they have to submit that to Department of Corrections or basically communicate that?
Yeah, so inside Missouri Department of Corrections, they have what's called IPOs, or institutional parole officers, and they work with the inmates, or offenders is probably a better way to put it, with them obtaining a home plan. And so to come to Lighthouse, there's an application process to come stay with us. They would talk to their IPO. They would ask for an application to Lighthouse Mission, Freedom Through Christ Ministries. They would fill out the application, and then the IPO would email that. Some people still fax, but
who's faxing?
Some people do.
If it relates to the government, that is the last place where I'm still seeing fax. Right. So that would make sense. But yeah,
they would email me the application. We'd take a look at it and see if we think the guy's a fit to come to the Lighthouse Mission. We are selective in who we take. We want guys who are open-minded to a faith-based way of living, because we are a faith-based organization. And yeah. Application process comes to me. We take a look at it, and if we think the guy's a fit, depending on bed space and things like that, we give him an opportunity.
So how do they even know that it exists? Do you guys have some kind of connections within DOC, or is there a list of places they could go, or how does that even work?
Several different ways. Word of mouth inside of DOC.
Oh, sure.
A lot of times guys have either heard about the Lighthouse program, or they have been through the Lighthouse program previously and stumbled and fell, and they're back incarcerated. There is a list of different places that these guys can go. A lot of guys, if they give their life to the Lord in there, they're looking for a place where they can have positive influences that can help them on their journey with Jesus. And several different ways that people hear about us inside the institution.
So you guys, where are is there like houses? It's that these guys, I mean, they more or less are structured like a house. Do they look like a house?
They look just like a house.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's how many people can be in one? How many do you have? Where are they? Because they're mostly around the lake for Lighthouse, right?
We have 3 houses in Camdenton. They're on the same piece of property there. We house 30 guys there, and then we have a house in the Laclede County area as well that houses another 10.
Okay. So 10 guys per house is your
limit,
more or less, typically?
We can house up to 45.
Okay.
But usually a good number is around 40.
Yeah. Okay. So the mission is to help guys as they're stepping out of prison.
Yes.
To, frankly, to come to know the Lord. Like, you're very explicitly faith-based.
Yes.
They're not like required to be a Christian as they step into that, you were telling me, but at least have to be willing to be in that environment.
Right.
And then tell me a little about the day in a life, because from what you were telling me when we talked, it's fairly structured and pretty full. And even there's some limitations in terms of technology and different stuff. So tell me a little about what it's like to be somebody who steps out of prison and steps into Lighthouse, one of the homes for Lighthouse.
Yeah, I guess the day in the life of a guy who has just recently gotten there is a little different for a guy who's been there for a little bit. So a guy, when he generally first gets there, there's a lot of obstacles that we have to help them through. A lot of times when they get out, they don't have an ID or a birth certificate. It's pretty easy for us to get if you were born in Missouri, but if you weren't, sometimes getting those kinds of documents from other states is hard.
They've never had one, or they just didn't keep track of it, or what's the deal?
Whenever you go to prison, they don't let you take your ID cards or anything like that with you.
Okay.
And so a lot of times those things are lost.
So by the time you get out, it's who knows. Okay.
Yeah. But once we secure those, we go to work getting them employment. We work with PenMac in Camden and some other places as well. And the first week looks like us just getting some things ironed out so we can get you to work. A lot of guys don't have clothes, and so we have to get them clothes. These guys are basically... Most of them are starting over from scratch, and we're going to work getting them clothing, hygiene items, different things like that, just making them feel comfortable, making them feel like they belong, making them feel accepted. And so the first week there is just, a lot of us take it for granted, really. You know what I mean? Just go to work, getting them their basic needs.
Just doing normal life stuff, on-ramping back into being a normal human that's not in prison.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's week one.
Week one.
Like, remember what it's like to be on the outside of the prison walls and get your hygiene and your life in order. How do you connect them with jobs? You said PenMac, and then, I mean, is that a pretty good flow of opportunities for them, or how quickly are guys typically able to get into some kind of job? Does it vary? Or?
Usually within the first week or two.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, PenMac's pretty good they got lots of jobs.
Great. So guys, and that's good, because I understand that guys coming out of prison, that there's a lot of jobs they can't have. There's frankly a lot of people that wouldn't hire. So it's good that you guys have a pipeline for them to get into jobs that will work for them.
Yes.
Because they have to pay to be there, don't they, at Lighthouse?
Yes, so the way that works is after we get them a job and they start getting a paycheck, they pay $225 a week to stay with us. That includes their food, their shelter, their transportation to and from work. That basically includes everything for them. And then the guys have a little, we'll say, skin in the game, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's basically how we're funded, is the guys actually fund. We're self-sufficient. The guys pay their way.
So, yeah, they're basically paying almost $1,000 a month to be there.
Yes.
And but again, that covers literally like food and transportation. And so it's worth it. It's a good deal from a certain perspective. But it's good that they're actually having to pay in. And you were telling me that model means that you don't really fundraise, right?
No, not much. Every once in a while, we'll do a little fundraiser or something like that, do an open house or something like that. But it's more about just having the community come and see what the Lord's doing at the Lighthouse as opposed to doing much fundraising.
So a guy gets in, he figures out what it's like to live life outside prison walls again, gets a job. What is, again, just then a normal day in life? Because he doesn't typically have a vehicle, still doesn't have a cell phone for a while,
Yes,
right?
yep.
So how long does that, what are some of those parameters?
Yeah, typically guys, when they get there, we're trying to limit some of the stumbling blocks for them that we've seen.
So what are those?
Cell phones. These days, even our kids are one click away from stumbling or being tempted. So it's 3 months where guys can have a cell phone when they get there. It's 3 months before they can have a vehicle before they get there. And then after that, the program, the structure gets a little less structured.
Okay.
But basically, they have to be able to earn the right to get their cell phone and to get their vehicle. And the way they do that is just to come and do what's expected of them. And
Do you find that most or all or what are able to accept that and do that, or do you get some pushback on that, or how does that?
The younger generation struggles a little bit with the cell phone thing, with technology, I think. But the older guys, they're a little bit more submissive, I think, to the rules. But the younger generation, they were raised on technology.
Sure.
So we do get some pushback on that. But with that being said, that's part of the application process is when they fill out the application to the Lighthouse, we always make sure that they're aware of the program rules or the program dynamics.
Yeah.
So there's really no surprises when they get there. And a lot of times the guys, if there is a little pushback, they start to see, hey, man, these guys here at the Lighthouse, the leadership in place at the Lighthouse, the rules at the Lighthouse, they're for my own benefit. They're because they love me. They want to see me succeed. And a lot of guys, they may struggle with it, but then they start to accept it. Hey, there really is less distractions with this cell phone. There really is some value in me not having the ability to just jump in my car and go wherever I want to go.
Because, especially early out of prison,
Right.
probably where they want to go and who they want to talk to are going to tend to be taking them right back into the thing that landed them in prison in the first place.
Right. And then with social media these days, these guys are they're one click away or they're one social media platform away from being influenced by all those negative influences from their past.
Yeah. And do you find that 3-month gap helps them make a good break there? What do you see in terms of now when they've got their freedom and their phone, a vehicle and a phone or whatever, how do they do with that on average?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think it's a mixture, and so that first 3 months it's pretty vital. And so what we're doing that first few months, really the home program, is trying to get these guys to learn a new way to live, to change the way that they think. And the model we have there is God, family, work. And trying to get them to keep their priorities in line, say, hey, my relationship with Jesus, it's got to be number one. And I can use my cell phone in a way that honors God, or I can use I use my vehicle the same way. And so that first 3 months, we're trying to get these guys to start building their lives upon Jesus and his teachings. The guys who really buy into that, the first 3 months, they really start to say, hey, there's something to this. When they get the cell phone or they get the vehicle, they're less distracted because their focus is where it needs to be at.
Their life became about something better than what they maybe would have wanted to do with those things previously.
Absolutely. And it's a mixture.
Yeah.
We get guys there that they're, I guess you would say, half-heartedly seeking. They're taking some of the suggestions of the program, but not all of them. And so we do see guys struggle that they get the cell phone or they get the car. We see them struggle a little more. You know what I mean?
That first 3 months, are their lives pretty structured? And you guys are taking them to work, or somebody's taking them to work.
Yes.
And then literally picking them up at work.
Yes.
Bringing them back to there, and they're not going out anywhere. Or what does that look like?
Well,
and then what do their evenings look like? Weekends? How is that? Is that really structured for them, or do they have a lot of freedom to do that? What does that look like?
The first month that they're there, it is very structured. You're not allowed to leave and go on pass or anything like that. You're only allowed to leave with approved staff. But after you've been there a month, they are allowed to leave and go on pass every other weekend with family. We don't really allow them to leave with just per se friends. It has to be family members. And so the first month, it is super structured. But after that, it kind of loosens up a little bit. We want these guys to be going back to their families because family is important. You know what I mean? It's important for these guys to start to let God mend some of these relationships that may have been broken. And yeah, after they're a month, they're allowed to leave and go on pass every other weekend. What was the other question?
I don't even remember.
I don't either.
You were telling me, though, when we talked the other day about it, there's evening Bible studies and stuff they do with that's right. That was the question.
Okay.
Yeah, like their evenings, and what is the day's schedule?
So a typical day for guys that's there, they would wake up and go to work just like me and you. A lot of the jobs that they work, all the jobs that they work are day jobs. So when they get home, there's meetings Monday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Saturday. They go and do a little outreach to the treatment center there in Lynn Creek. Sunday morning, they go to church, and Sunday evening, they do a little house meeting to confront any house issues that may have come up throughout the week. They are required to do chores while they're there because some of these guys, they need to be taught what it looks like to clean up after myself or what it looks like. We teach them how to cook. They have to cook one night a week.
So each guy has to cook.
They have to cook one night a week for their house. They have to cook dinner.
Yeah.
And so we're also teaching them just basic life skills as well that sometimes because of just different things they haven't learned, you know what I mean? So when I got to the Lighthouse, I just did all my laundry together, you know what I mean? And now I learned that probably how to do the whites separate, but yeah, just different things like that.
So talk about that a little bit. Talk about your role and then your role now and then how you got connected with Lighthouse. So what do you do right now?
Yes, so my role right now is I am the program director. And basically what that looks like is, man, I don't even like to, it doesn't even seem like work to me, man. It still blows me away that I get to wake up and drive there. And man, my daughter says when people ask her what I do, she says, oh, he just hangs out with his friends all day. But I am the program director of Lighthouse. I have several guys that work under me as well. How I got to the Lighthouse is just like all the other guys get there. I filled out the same application they did. In 2013, I got to the Lighthouse from prison. I got the application through my IPO, filled it out, and got accepted just like they did. In 2013, that was my 7th trip to prison, in and out from age 19 to 33.
Related to what, if you don't mind sharing?
Drugs and alcohol. Man, I kind of had my own ideas about how my life was supposed to go. And kind of led me down a path of I was looking for, man, this is I feel like I have to go back to like when I was 12 to even talk about this.
Oh.
Man, when I was 12, I still remember where I was at. I lived in this little subdivision it was Orion, Illinois, out in the middle of cornfields. But I was walking down this hill with a couple of my friends to my house. And I just had this realization or this moment in my life that, man, something was missing. And at that point in time, I couldn't put my finger on that. I was raised in church, and I've heard about God, the God of the Bible, and Jesus, and I heard that message my whole life. But at that moment, man, I realized, wait a minute, there's something missing. And I think for the next few years of my life, I tried to put my finger on what that was. And I looked for it in sports, and I looked for it in different social groups, and I looked for it eventually in the American dream, and I looked for it, what does it mean to be a father? And man, I think I looked for that answer of what was missing in my life all the way to about 33. And what I figured out, it wasn't something physical that was missing in my life. It was something spiritual. And in 2013, man, things got really bad for me. It got so bad that I tried to commit suicide. And it was the winter of 2013. And man, life got really bad. I had this storm going on inside of me. Is the only way I know how to describe it, Nathan. And I remember waking up that morning and I was just mad. I was mad at God. I was mad about how my life had turned out. I'd spent the majority of my life in and out of institutions, kind of living my own way. My life was supposed to turn out a certain way. And I woke up that morning, I was just mad. And I got in an argument with the mother of my children. I was living in this little silver bullet. I like to call it the silver bullet because it was a little Airstream trailer that my dad was gracious enough to let me stay in. And we got in this argument, and I broke everything inside this little trailer because I was just so mad about the way my life had turned out. And I was mad at God. And I was sitting there in the glass that was laying there on the floor, and I began to just call God every vile name that you could think of. And man, I was just mad at him. And I was sitting there, and there's glass there, and I cut my wrist, and I'm sitting there, and there's blood running down my arms, and there's a knock on my door. And I was ashamed of what I just tried to do. I thought it was probably going to be one of my friends at the door. And so I put on a flannel, put on a pair of sunglasses because I was crying. And I opened that door, Nathan, and there was a pastor standing there. And at that moment in my life, man, there was no doubt that there was a God and that he loved me and that he was real. I just got done calling him every name that I could call him in the book. I was so angry at him, and he wasn't offended by that. He loved me enough to show me in that moment that he was real. I began to question whether or not he was even real. And the pastor looked at me and said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Man, I need a cigarette." You know what I mean? And
That's a great answer.
yeah, you said, "What do you need?" And so he snatched me up. He took me down to the gas station, bought me some cigarettes. And I don't think he knew. I didn't say anything. I was ashamed. But in that moment, man, there was no doubt in my mind that there was a God. He was the God of the Bible, and that he was real. And I was still kind of stuck in my circumstances, though. Just because I knew God was real didn't mean that I still wasn't stuck in my circumstances. Fast forward a few months, and I woke up again one morning, and man, I knew the way that I was living only led back to one place, because my past told me that. I was smart enough to know that. And I had began reading the Bible just a little bit, and I didn't verbalize a prayer that morning. But I remember thinking like, man, I want out of this life so bad. I don't want to live this life no more. I knew that God was real. And I didn't say a prayer, but I believe God heard my heart that morning. And later on that day, I ended up getting pulled over. And I was on the run on my probation parole. And it was a state patrolman, man. He treated me. It was one of the first times that felt like I was treated like a human. And I didn't give the other police officers probably much of a reason to treat me like a human, but that day, man, I felt this burden. Was like he pulled me over. I knew what time it was. I knew I had to face the music, and it's like I had this burden lifted off of me from looking over my shoulder. So I got down to county jail. I knew I had to face the music. I got down to county jail, and there was no doubt in my mind that God was real. And I got on my knees in that cell, and I knew I was probably going back to prison for my 7th trip. And I had been taught my whole life that I could pray the sinner's prayer. Man, it's not what I prayed, though. I knew that I was a sinner in need of a Savior. But it sounded more, man, Jesus, if you are who you say you are, if this message is, I've been hearing this message my whole life. If you are who you say you are, my life is yours. I'll go where you want me to go, and I'll live how you want me to live. And I meant it. I meant it. It wasn't lip service anymore. It was from my heart. And I picked up my Bible the very next day, and it became alive to me. God began to talk to me through his word. We began to build this relationship of trust. He began to show me that I could trust him, and we began to do life together. And he began working in my life, man. And there's a couple different things along the way. My parole officer at the time, her name was Robin Watson. And she came down to see me. They come down to see you to make reports on you. And she came down, and I remember coming up with this story to just get myself out of trouble. And I went down there, and I don't remember what I said to Robin, but she looked at me and she said, "Chris, you're not getting out." And she said, "This first time anybody said this to me." She said, "Chris, I believe in you." And this woman had sent me back to prison. I think this was the 4th time she was going to send me back to prison. But it was like she spoke life into me that day. And I went to prison that last trip with a changed heart, building a relationship with Jesus. And Jesus, he began to use people along the way to encourage me. And Robin said, it's like she spoke life to me. "I believe in you, Chris." And she had no reason to say that, you know what I mean? And I said, you know what? If Robin Watson believes in me, maybe I can do this. And so I went with a different mindset and they sent me to a prison treatment, which that was my third one. But I went with a different mindset. And so I got there and God began to just work in my life. And the last thing Robin said to me, she said, Chris, do something different when you get out this time. And I grabbed a hold of that too. My dad made it a little easier for me. I called my dad for a home plan, as we talked about earlier. And he said, Chris, I love you, son, but you can't come here. It's not working for you. It's not working for me. And God started pushing me in the direction he wanted me to go. And I ended up with the Lighthouse application. There's a guy in there, his name's Timothy Smith. And Tim said, hey, Chris, you ever heard of the Lighthouse before? I said, yeah, man, I've heard of it. It's pretty hard to get in there. And he gave me the address to the Lighthouse, and I threw it in the trash. I threw it in the trash, and something inside of me that us as believers would say, the Holy Spirit, said, man, get that out. And so I walked back over to the trash. I got it out. I wrote the Lighthouse. I got the application, filled it out, poured my heart out into it, man, and I got accepted. And that's my story in a nutshell.
So you got accepted. You went through the program there, basically. Yep. And afterwards, they were like, hey, do you want to work here?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Pretty much. So I got there in 2013, and man, I was smart enough at that point to know that, man, the Lord had brought me to the Lighthouse. He made a way for me to be there. And I decided that I was going to submit to the leadership that God had placed in my life, Romans 13 type thing, submit to that leadership. And I got there and I was like, man, I don't know about this place. There's got to be a catch, man. And I remember just telling the Lord, I said, man, I'm going to give this place a week. And there's got to be a catch. And a week came and went, and I started to figure out, like, there wasn't a catch. The guys there, they really wanted to see me succeed, and they loved me, and they wanted to help me, and they weren't afraid to correct me and encourage me. And I started to see, hey, these rules are in place for my benefit. I need these. And so, yeah, I went through the program, and then in 2015, one of the program directors passed away. One guy decided to move on, and the board of directors, man, they asked me to step into that role. And man, the rest it's been 11 years now.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
So hard pivot into that. But man, thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah.
That's super powerful. That's really one of the most powerful stories I've ever had on this show. So
thanks, man.
Thank you for being willing to share that.
Yeah, I'm open book, man. You know what I mean? My past is there.
Yeah. I think that's good to just own it and go,
yeah,
this is where I was.
Yeah.
This is where I am now.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a pivot then, because you mentioned a board.
Yeah.
So the way Lighthouse is run is you have a director or directors. Are there multiple program directors and then a board of directors that kind of hires and deals with some of that stuff?
There is a board of directors. Most of those guys have a past either with probation and parole, or they're pastors. Some of the guys have been there since day one, and so I think there's 5 or 6 board members.
Okay,
and then there's me. There's only one program director.
Okay,
there's me.
So how do you decide who gets to come into the Lighthouse? Because you have 40 up to 45 capacity. Guys are there from. Did you say typically 6 to 12 months is the average time a guy is there? It's men only. There's no women's homes. This is like 4 different homes. They're all exclusively men.
Yes.
How do you decide? And how do you even know how much room you're going to have? I don't know if that guy's going to need to be here for 6 months or 12 months. Or how do you figure all that?
Yeah, so I've gotten a little better at that over the last 10 years of experience. But what I think that's where God uses my past is that He's given me the ability to discern guys who are serious about getting out and staying out and doing something different with their lives. And that's what the application process is for. We recently built a new house. Being able to schedule guys with their out dates has become a little bit easier because we got 5 or 6 different, we ended up with 16 more beds. The target, a good number is 40, but the 5 or 6 extra beds gives me the ability to
have some buffer, basically.
Yeah. So that gives me the ability to look into the future a little bit. We generally don't accept guys unless they're 4 to 5 months short of their date or around that time.
What do you mean short of their date?
Out dates. Guys in Missouri, they'll see the parole board, and the parole board will give them an out date.
Oh, I see.
And then we do different things with the court system as well. Camden County, Miller County, Laclede County, Cole County, just different counties throughout the state. They'll do what's called a furlough or a bond condition. They'll let the guy out of county jail to come to the program and do the Lighthouse program instead of going to prison.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
There are guys that you don't accept, obviously. Do you get quite a few, like what's the acceptance rate, or like what you get quite a few applications that you have to reject because of space or because they're not a good fit, or?
Yeah, we get, man, that's such a good question. I'd say for every 10 applications, we probably get 2 takers, just for different reasons. A lot of times, the effort they're willing to give me on that application is
any application,
right?
Yeah.
Is the effort they're going to give us when they get there, and so yeah.
Some guys do well there. Yeah. Some guys do not.
Yeah.
So, tell me a little about that, because or I guess start with this: is there anybody that you don't let in?
Yeah, guys, you have to register as sex offenders.
Okay.
We don't take guys who have to register as sex offenders.
But other than that,
it's all on the table.
Murder or assault or drug issue, like any of those potential things don't exclude you from being able to get out of prison and go to the Lighthouse, other than having to register as a sex offender.
Yes.
Okay. So then, talk a little about what you see, maybe commonalities in guys that bomb out of the program, guys that are there for a little bit and they end up back in prison, or I don't know, do some guys just disappear? Or I don't know. I honestly don't know.
That does happen occasionally. Occasionally we get guys that go and pass, and then we just don't see them again, or they'll write me again from jail or prison. But I think so. Those guys come at all different walks. Generally what we see with the younger guys is they have lessons to learn that sometimes we can't teach them. They have to go out there and they have to live it and they have to learn it. Generally it has to do with women or relationships, you know what I mean?
They want to learn the hard way.
Yeah, you know how it is. How we learned when we were younger.
You learn through mistakes and whether you should or not sometimes. Yeah.
So we see that a lot with the younger guys. Older guys that are over 50, we generally see that challenging their way of thinking becomes a little harder because they've been thinking that way for a lot longer than some of the younger guys. Sure. And so we see them guys struggle some. The Bible, it challenges our way of thinking. And so we do see guys that are older that struggle a little bit. We've all got a core belief system. We challenge that. But guys that usually guys who come between 30 and 50, they've learned some hard mistakes. They're not so set in their ways that it's a little easier for them to begin to let the Lord change them from the inside out. They begin to see, hey, like what it talks about in Romans, to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Well, how do I do that? Man, I got to relearn. I got to learn the way that the Lord would have me to think, or Jesus would have me to think. And they pick up their Bibles and the Lord begins to shape them.
Cool. Tell me about some success stories.
Man, there's too many. There's really too many to account for. Man, success in the eyes of the Lighthouse is a guy who comes, he builds his life upon Jesus and his teachings. He goes home and he begins to be the man that God's called him to be. And so they're all over the place, Nathan. They're out there. There's a guy that comes to mind. His name's Jason Yerlicks. He runs the Broken Road of Recovery Ministry over here at Mount Carmel Church. It's a Thursday night deal, recovery meeting. He's out here involved in his church. That's what we want to see guys do. We want to see them get involved in their church. Another guy named Jonathan McClure, he left out of Lighthouse and he went and started a ministry called the Mountain Moving Ministry in Mountain Grove, Missouri. Basically took our model at Lighthouse and planted a ministry called Mountain Moving Ministry. There's a guy named Matt West. He left out of Lighthouse. He works in a factory now in Camdenton, but he's got custody of his granddaughter. His daughter was struggling. He was able to get custody of his granddaughter. Man, there's all kinds of stories out there of guys who have been in the program and they're out there in the community being the light that we should be.
How long has Lighthouse been in existence? When was it founded?
2001. It was founded in 2001.
So 25 years.
25 years.
And I know you've grown your capacity over those 25 years, but if you're moving through on average over those 25 years, call it 50, 60 guys a year or something like that. I'm just doing rough math, right? That's well over 1,000
Yeah.
guys that have come through the Lighthouse in the last 25 years. And again, not like you're saying, not all of them have had success, but many have. And I think that's a great point, that those guys are out in the community now, like bringing real value, seeking to love and put their families back together and all that stuff. And that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So the one thing that helps when I got into being the program director, I had to very quickly define what failure was going to look like for me in order for me to sleep at night.
Right.
And everybody who comes through the Lighthouse, they all get the same opportunity. It's what you do with your opportunity. And one of the things I begin to realize is that we're sowing seeds. When these men get there, immediately we're sowing seeds by the way that we treat them, by the way that we love them, by the way we encourage them, by the way that we're pointing them to the Lord, teaching them what they need to do on a daily basis. And a lot of times those seeds, they get watered later. So guys may stumble, they may end up back in prison, but they remember, wait a minute, this is what Lighthouse was teaching me. And somebody hands them a Bible in there and they pick it up. We see a lot of guys stumble and fall, but a lot of them, we see them get back up and we see them dust themselves off and begin to pursue the Lord again. And so we see a lot of guys stumble, but there's a lot of seeds that are sown there as well. So
I bet that takes a long view.
Yeah.
For you as program director to be able to not see a guy who screws up and just give up on him.
Yeah.
Because I assume that probably a lot of those guys, people have been giving up on them a lot in their lives, maybe for good reason, honestly, or whatever. But that you don't, sounds like, try not to do that. That you go, hey, I've seen this, and you pick yourself back up and keep growing.
We get guys that come through the program. We got a board member. He went through the Lighthouse 3 times. And now he's a board member, and it was his 3rd time that he really picked up on the program. You know what I mean? He got to a point where he was just really ready, open-minded, and now he's a board member.
Amazing. A couple other things, and then we'll start to wrap up. But you shared a little about, so you mentioned the patrol officer that was treated you like a human.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you guys work with the court system. Share with me what your perspective is. You've worked in an interesting place in the justice system at the exit point, right?
Yeah.
And from where you stand, what do you see? Strengths, weaknesses, things you think that our justice system, everything from law enforcement to prosecutors to the courts and judges and all that are doing well, or things that you're like, man, I don't know why they do. I don't know. I'm just curious about your perspective.
Yeah. So I think over the last 10 or 15 years, the court system and law enforcement as a whole they're a lot more educated now. And so there's a lot more things in place as far as trying to get people help instead of prison. I personally believe prison saved my life a handful of times. That's what worked for me. But these days, I guess I would say that they're more educated in addiction. They have things like treatment court. And I think treatment court's a great thing. I think it all just depends on the individual that is going through the treatment court. Are they going to be willing? Are they ready? Are they going to give the program? Are they going to give treatment court 110%? Are they going to have 1 foot in, 1 foot out? The same with the DWI court. They have DWI court as well. And they have, I think the court system as a whole, as far as understanding what addiction is, I think they're doing a pretty good job. They will exhaust every measure that they have before they send an individual to prison. And I think that's good. I think the prison system,
particularly when it relates to drugs,
Yeah.
substance abuse and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. The majority, so if you really start to talk to individuals who are incarcerated, you'll find out that probably 90% of them, they have a drug or an alcohol issue, or they struggle with that. You know what I mean? And that could be the underlying symptom of, hey, why did I go commit this burglary? I needed some drugs. Or I'm not saying that's the case for all
and
of
it's
them.
not necessarily to have an explanation for it is not like an excuse
Right.
for it, but it's a good way of understanding what's going on with that person. Yeah.
Yeah.
So something maybe that you wish people knew. This was a question we talked about before we started recording. Something that it could be good, bad, ugly, whatever, but something maybe that you think either people misunderstand or you wish people knew about folks that have been through DOC that have been in and out of prison, that have a felony on their record. Well, I don't know. What thoughts on that? I'm not even really trying to lead with that question. I'm just curious as to what you've seen and what perspective you think people should have there.
Man, so there's this guy, his name's Gary Lee. He's been just a mentor of mine. And he's always got a good word of wisdom or insight. He said to me a few months ago, he said, Chris, everybody's struggling with something. And man, I think that's true for everybody. And guys who get incarcerated or people who end up in prison, man, they're struggling. They're struggling with something. And I think when we can look at it like that, hey, we've all got things we're struggling with. It may not be drugs, it may not be alcohol, but it could look different. And I think that for me, that's what is able for me to have grace with people, not just talk about grace, not just on a Sunday morning. Man, that gives me the ability to live out grace, favor with people, like looking at them and knowing, man, everybody's got something that they're struggling with. And I think when we can look at it like that, hey, my problem didn't manifest in drugs or alcohol, but my problem is this. And it didn't end up in DOC, but it had consequences. The thing maybe I'm struggling with, it does have consequences. And so I think when we're able to look at it like that, everybody's got something they're struggling with, Nathan. But when we look at it like that, bro, we're able to have just a little bit of grace for people.
That's a good word, man. We're going to end on that.
All right.
I appreciate you taking time to come in, talk a little about Lighthouse Mission. And my hope and my expectation is there will be a lot of people who watch or listen to this episode that didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
And again, there's not really anything they even need to do. I mean, I guess if they know someone who's incarcerated, recommend it to them. Yeah. That's maybe a good call to action. Yeah. Tell them to check out Lighthouse Mission. But you guys don't really do fundraisers. There's not really anything you need there. You're on staff there. You have a board, and you're just doing the work. You're just out there doing it. And so I think people will be encouraged to hear that you're helping guys find a way, not just to not be a criminal anymore kind of thing, but to actually see redemption in their lives, to find faith in Christ, and then to be able to put their families back together, to go out in the world and either start some kind of ministry or mission-focused kind of organization like guys you've mentioned, or be productive members in the workforce, which is a great thing, or whatever, and that those folks are literally in the Lake community, people that have come through the Lighthouse and are now genuinely healed. Not perfect, because I haven't met one yet, but that you guys are actually helping people step out of something and into something a lot better. So anyways, I just want to commend y'all on the work that you're doing there.
Thank you, bro.
And thank you for coming on.
Man, thanks for
having
me.
I really appreciate it. Folks, it's been Chris Sanders with Lighthouse Mission, Freedom Through Christ Ministries. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I certainly did. Learned a lot and was inspired. And if you have enjoyed the show, enjoyed this episode, please give it a share to other folks that you think might. Always appreciate the listens and the shares and the kind words about the show. If you have any ideas for somebody I ought to interview or bring on, shoot it my way. Send it just probably on Facebook message would be the easiest way to reach out. Always appreciate it. Until next time, stay anchored, stay curious, and we'll see you soon.